Scene 2. It was past supper already, and hard men and women sat at rough tables, shouting over the rusty sackbut's din and draining mugs of ale in the dim light of wilting glow feathers and smoking candles. A blind fiddler played a provincial jig in the corner, the hat at his feet clanking with the odd farthing or clipped penny tossed by a press of folk dancing, their shoes stomping a lusty rub-a-dub on the reed-strewn floorboards. Kit found an empty table in a smoky corner, reeking of stale urine, and slid onto the bench, tapping her fingers in time with the music. Most of the patrons were seamen or fisherfolk, but there were a motley collection of more sinister types scattered about, including an odd trio that caught her eye. The largest of the three was a dusky, broad-shouldered man dressed in black, with a trim salt and pepper beard and hawkish eyes set under a low brow. A stark contrast to the boisterous knot of muscle, scarce a yardstick and a half tall, arguing with him. The little man had pale, almost translucent skin under a wide-brimmed hat adorned with a jaunty feather, and his stark white moustache, its thick, curled ends sweeping boldly, framed a sharply trimmed goatee with roguish flair. But it was the tall, bronzed woman who seemed to smoulder like smokeless flame, watching them with detached interest and a wry smile that drew Kit's attention. She wore a dark navy surcoat with billowing sleeves, and her jet-black hair was curiously braided in long rows of thin braids fastened behind her neck. Kit reckoned she'd never seen a more beautiful or predatory woman in her life. The woman's amber eyes flicked across the tavern, locking with Kit's, and she ducked her head, heart racing. "Best not to gape at those folk, lad," a plump serving girl told Kit, approaching her table as she wiped her hands with a rag. "Especially not the Sah woman. That one's dangerous." "Is she really from Sahria?" Kit asked, instantly curious. She'd played the Sultan's evil vizier in more than one play and was still fascinated with the mythic Sunward lands, even if it was somewhat childish for a girl her age. "Aye," the girl replied, sizing up the scrappy urchin before her. "You have coin or no? 'Cause warming my bench and gawking at my guests don't come free." "How much for pottage and small beer?" Kit asked. "A penny, and not a clipped one neither." Kit's eyes widened. She'd expected a halfpenny maybe, 3 farthings at most. The serving girl held out her hand, and Kit gave her the last penny she had. "You ken a safe place to sleep round here?" she asked as she watched her silver disappear. "Hoy, Nan!" the small man with the white moustache shouted over the din, slapping his thigh. "I'm dry as a nun's quim. Get your fine young arse over here and wet my whistle." "Hold your tongue, Canon," the girl called over her shoulder before shrugging at Kit. "Safe? This is Baywalk, lad. You want safe, go lodge at the Crown Spire with Her Majesty. Common rooms upstairs, top floor up past the whores and cockfights. Penny and a half each, bloom close, shilling per 10 tide. And no dream tar, or John Keeper'll throw your skinny arse out the window." "Penny and a half? Are the beds stuffed with goose down?" "Nay, straw. You can try your luck at the Ravenspur Almshouse on Black Kettle Lane if you prefer. Her ladyship sees it kept free of the worst vermin." Nan left Kit's table, throwing her arms wide and laughing at the man she'd called Canon, as his dark companion got up from the table and clapped the small man's shoulder with a familiar ease. "See you keep your powder away from Nan," he said, his tone half order, half jest. "She's liable to spark it off." "I should be so lucky," Canon replied, as the man strode toward Kit, his dark cloak billowing behind him, a broadsword slapping his thigh. Or over to the communal piss-pot directly behind her, she realised with relief. As he rolled his shoulders and sighed not an arm length away from her, unlacing his codpiece, she caught sight of the worn leather pouch hanging loosely at his belt. His eyes were half on the tavern's rowdy throng, and Kit calculated the risk. Her last penny was gone, and that purse could buy far more than a 10 tides lodging and food. She decided his purse was worth it. Pulling a strand of hair out of her cap, she twisted it around her finger 3 times for good luck, nimble fingers, and an easy mark as she waited for the right moment. And just then, as if the fairies had heard her, a drunken dancer stumbled into the man in black. Kit slid low off the bench without hesitation, fingers darting to untie the purse's knot as she had countless times before. It dropped into her palm, heavy with coin, as he exchanged insults with the other man. Sitting back up and composing herself, she slipped the purse into a slit in her shirt, tucking it snugly up between her flattened breasts under the binding cloth. Forcing herself not to grin, she studied the broadside. She'd been filching since she was old enough to toddle after Uncle William, but now, with a dozen harvests of marks and near misses behind her, she knew better than to gloat. Foists younger than her got cocky and lost fingers. Kit had learned to keep her face blank and her eyes sharp. The woodcut of the Zindarian princess and elephant was perhaps the most ridiculous thing she'd ever seen. Meanwhile, the man, none the wiser, finished relieving himself and turned to rejoin his companions. A hand clamped down on her shoulder, firm but precise, pinning her without bruising, and her heart stopped. So much for fey luck. They were capricious, and it was foolish of her to invoke them without a better offering. The hand was large, scarred, with gnarled knuckles that looked like they'd broken untold heads. The broad-shouldered man leaned close, his dark eyes scanning her like a chessboard, missing nothing. Reckon you have something that isn't yours, lad," he growled into her ear, his voice like coal falling from a scuttle. "My purse, to be precise." Kit summoned the waif's wide-eyed tremble, every line rehearsed 100 times on creaking stages. A good mark always fell for tears. She met his dark gaze, feigning a trembling lip. "'Twas the drunkard what bumped into you, good master. Swear to Kadishor and each and every one of his 1,000 blessed martyrs I do." She nodded soberly and traced a line from brow to navel to reinforce the piety of her oath. He sniffed. "Stand up." She cocked her head to the side, appearing confused, but the hand moving to his dagger's hilt got her off the bench in a hurry. He asked to see her hands, and she obeyed, and then he felt around her waist, removing her bodkin and near-empty purse, before checking the bench behind her and under the table. "'Twas the drunkard, good master. Swear to—" "Kadishor and all 1,000 of his bloodied martyrs," the man grunted. "I heard you the first time." Frowning, he thoroughly began patting down her shirt and slops, first back and then front. "You handle that lad's person fondly, Captain. Didn't ken you fancied catamounts." "Catamite, you dullard," the man called over his shoulder, his steady fingers grazing Kit's chest but missing the purse's weight. "The other's a wild cat." "Ho, so like Scarlet, eh?" Aye," the man grunted. Without warning, he grabbed Kit's crotch. She gasped and his eyes widened slightly. Then he barked a laugh and leaned in close, speaking low. "Seems there's a purse down there after all, eh? Just not one I'm looking for." He winked, unabashed. "My apologies, lass." Pursing his lips, he nodded to himself, straightening as Nan approached with Kit's pottage and beer. "Everything all right, Captain Kocht?" she asked him. "'Twas merely a misunderstanding," he told Nan, then turned to Kit. "Wasn't it?" "Aye, just a misunderstanding," Kit confirmed. She considered slipping away after he rejoined his companions, but that'd look even more suspicious. So she dug into her late supper, reminding herself to go in and light a candle for Fiona the Martyr the next time she passed a chapel. After a time, the trio exited the tavern, and she stretched and stood, scratching her belly. It'd be Bloom Close soon, and finding a better place to sleep was probably less wise than just staying here. At least with the coin she pinched, she could probably get a straw pallet in a corner with a curtain. She yawned and turned, looking for Nan, but instead found herself staring up at a pair of angular amber eyes. "If you enjoy breathing, I suggest you come with me," the Sah woman purred.